Hi and welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be walking you through some rotten weatherboard replacements, particularly in a couple of tricky corners. For most of this video we're going to be focusing on one particular corner. I couldn't really find the videos on how to replace rotten weatherboards in corners, and this is a learning process for me as well, so you can see my mistakes along the way. I'm not a builder, but I hope you get something out of this. This will be my sample that we take down to the shop, and we'll use that as a guide to help ensure we get the right weatherboard. I need a multi-tool to get in there to cut the nails that are behind there as well, and under here where it's nailed through, it might be nailed into that board. So, oops. Oh well, let's give it a crack. Alright, seem to have given it a bit of a pull, and this just comes straight out, so all good. As you can see, it's actually rotted through the I don't know what that layer is, but it's the moisture barrier, the old school building paper that we use in New Zealand. So I have to try and get in there and replace this board too, and see if we can get some of that put in there, but it's not a biggie. And I was talking to our builder about this stuff here, which goes up the side of the house. I forgot the name of it, scribing or something, scriber or something like that. He said that you don't always have to take it off if you've just got a couple of boards, but he said that, you know, if you're doing several boards you might find it easy just to remove that, but obviously that's more work, more time. The other place where we've got some couple of boards to replace is down here. It's really important, I noticed, when you go and check a board and you find some rot, my tip here would be to, I've already done it here, but I'll show you what I did. So the rot only went to about here, visibly, and there's two things that I noted. So the first thing is run your finger along the whole board and really get in there and see how far the rot goes, because I was about to measure my board up and sort of go to about here, and then I realised that in actual fact I'd need to replace the whole board. And the other thing I can just learn is that when the top board is rotten like this, it also pays to check the board underneath, which I got in there, and as soon as I got my finger in there I could see that the bottom board was also rotten quite far along. So, you know, if you didn't check properly and you went and bought materials, you'd be back at the shop again wishing you'd checked it properly the first time. So I learned that straight away, luckily the easy way. There are plenty of vids on YouTube on how to do basic weatherboard replacements, so we won't focus on this bit too much. It's really just, there's not many videos on how to do the corners, so we'll mainly be focusing on this area here and another area which is over here in the corner. So I do recommend, if you're going to be painting your house, get in there with a heat gun rather than just trying to sand it, because I got in there with a heat gun just to check that the corners were okay, and the heat gun or a blowtorch like this kind of thing here. Got this from Bunnings, very simple, super effective, much faster and than a heat gun, but also a bit more dangerous because you're actually setting stuff on fire to some degree. So, you know, you can see some of these bits here were smouldering and they could catch on fire, so you've got to be really careful with the gun. But anyway, I'm glad I did get in there because that exposed this corner to some pretty serious issues. So, you know, there's rot in here, which probably isn't too easy to see. There's rot in here, and this one needs to be replaced, and I'll do the one above as well because that's starting to get a bit yucky in the corner. And this one here was the first one that I noticed. Now, you could bog this up. You know, there's some good wood that's still in there, but you know, it's still damp. It might get 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 out of it, and then it's going to have to be replaced anyway, and I think it's just better to do it all in one hit. And again with this corner, you know, you can see the scriber down the side here, and that actually sits over the weatherboards to protect them. And in this case I'm going to try and get away with not removing that, because I know that it's, first of all, it's nailed in, which is not a big job. You could get your saw in there and you could cut those nails and you could pull the whole thing off, but it's nailed in multiple places all the way up to the top, and it's quite fiddly. It's also got a lot of silicone in behind it, so it's quite well adhered, and I don't want to risk damaging the window if I can avoid it. If I had to replace all of these, the builder said, yeah, sure, take the scraper off, but if you can fit a few in here without doing that, you know, just a few boards, then maybe just leave the scraper on. That's his advice. Right, I've got my boards from the local hardware store, which was an interesting experience in itself. What I found was that taking that piece in was a bit deceptive because it was quite rotten and didn't give exactly the correct profile. This isn't the same piece I had before, but what had happened is the piece that I took in had actually got very thin across here where it had rotted, which gave an incorrect measurement for this base side of the board that was sit like that. And so I learned an important tip, which probably seems obvious to builders, but you know, you measure in the middle, not at the base down here. Also, they didn't have exactly the right boards, which I'll show you later on, so I may need to cut them down. They're a little bit wider in terms of the distance from here to here upwards and so forth behind. So I don't know, I might not need to cut them, but we'll see. So I've managed to get these ones off. I didn't use the circular saw for this. I used the multi-tool to plunge cut in, and I have to say that that was the first time using this tool on weatherboards for me. So I basically started over here where there was already a cut underneath these soakers here. So I used the, if you don't have one of these, definitely get one. You'll need it, trust me. You might need two. If you haven't got a crowbar and one of these, you'll need two. And the builder said he uses two to help price them off. So the first thing to do is to get these soakers off and just get in behind them, pull them off and remove the nails. There was a couple more of them down here. The next thing was I found that I had to pry loose this upper board here, and that was a bit of a learning experience. Obviously the other two boards were still there at that point, so you know, twisting on this, it's very easy to crack the board. You can see I've done that just ever so slightly along there, but I will fill that later on. The next thing I learned is that you definitely will need a multi-tool, especially if you're not experienced like me at this. Why? Because you need the multi-tool to get up under the boards where you can't see the nails and to be able to cut through them. And you may need to cut through on the board side, so you can see how there's a nail, for example, in behind here. You might need to cut close to the board, and you may need to cut also close to the house. So there's actually two. I'll try and show you. That'll make sense when you get in there. But yeah, you'll need that multi-tool. And it was, at the first, it was very, very difficult to get those boards off. I pried this one loose all the way along. Once I had it loose using the pry bar, so I did is I used the pry bar or a nail removal bar like this. It was only about 14 bucks NZ dollars from your local Bunnings or what have you. Tapped that in there with a hammer quite firmly and then pulled it off. Actually, it was under here. So pulling this board back first before you begin removing everything, or the board that's above the boards you're going to remove, makes it a lot easier because your multi-tool is going to have to slot in under here to cut the nails. And as you can see here, you might need to make more than, well, there's only one cut on this one, but sometimes you'll need to cut more than once, and I'll knock them back in later on, otherwise they're going to stop me from getting that board in nicely. Yeah, so once I had that top board, the upper board slightly removed, I could get in and access those nails, and then I was able to sort of just basically smack it with a hammer quite hard and it come apart. And then once it was tilting, you know, up and down on a lever like that, I could see where the nails were. It made it easier to work out where the nails were. And the other tip was just to get your pry bar or your multi-tool up underneath while you're trying to feel for the nails, because you're not sure where they are, and you'll hear it dong on one, and then you can just go in and just go nice and slow with that multi-tool. You will need a blade that goes through metal and wood, so it's worth getting a slightly decent one. If you just get a wood one, there's no guarantee it's going to cut through the nails, and some of these older houses, they use some really thick ass nails for the cladding. Okay, next we're going to start on this corner here. As you can see, I've taken out some of those boards already, just sort of roughly, because they fell out. That was actually really easy. So I've learned that getting a bit of a hammer in there and smacking it actually isn't such a bad idea. It can make it easy to find out where the nails are and so on. But yeah, we'll get started on that. going to have to get in here and remove all these bits, which you don't need to see, but you can see there's some chunks in there, so they're going to have to come out, and I'll use the multi-tool to get in behind there and see if I can dig it out, remove these extra nails that are going to stop that next board from going in as well. The builder told me that this part here that you can see, that will be nailed down to here, so we're going to get in with the multi-tool. You can hear when you hit the nail, it makes a different noise, so give that a crack and I'll see how we go getting this out. It's almost out, but there's just one nail holding that in. Okay, so it turned out to be quite a bigger job than I thought it would be, for sure. So I'll take you in here and we can have a wee look. I think the most difficult thing, I think, was really getting in behind here to get these nails that were all in amongst here. Was nailed in from this side here right through the weatherboards at an angle, so the nails were quite tricky to get at, and you're just going to have to be patient if you're trying to get these boards off. I recommend starting from the bottom if you can, but you have to loosen the top boards, of course. So yeah, once you got say that you wanted to get this board off, you're going to have to get this board off first. You're going to get it lifted back, so you'll have to get it under here and cut with your reciprocating saw and cut the screw. You can see here where there's actually a stud just behind here, and you can see where that nail was going through right there. Now usually the builders will try and they should put the nail above the back board, the board that's behind, but quite often that nail actually just goes straight in through the very tippy top of that behind board, and of course that makes it quite tricky to get it out. Another example here where I very unfortunately had to go straight through the nail. I just managed to hit the center of the stud, and that's exactly where the nail was, so I actually cut the nail straight through. I did end up using a circular saw for some of this, a combination of circular saw, and I set the depth to be no greater than the distance between there and there, so that I'm not sawing into the wood too much. And of course, as some other people have pointed out in videos, you will chop through your membrane a little bit. Now this is a very old house, and as you can see the membrane's absolutely buggered anyway, and I had to rip all this one off, so we will replace that. But the bigger problem here is, of course, now that we're in here, we can actually see the extent of the damage. And what I initially thought was just 3 or 4 boards here and a couple down the bottom, as I got into it and tried to remove the boards, a lot of them cracked and powdered, sort of dust fell off, so I realized that they were rotten as well. So I'm actually going to have to take everything out to this as well. And of course the worst issue here we've got, I don't know if you can see this easily, but you know, this is a stud and it's in good condition up here, and very, very bad condition down here, so all the way down to the bottom that's rotten. So this is going to need to be looked at by a builder, which I'm not. I can't reclad it until the builder's had a look at it. So that's what happens sometimes, you just have to get a builder to have a look at it. It's unfortunate. Probably could have called the builder in, but you know, I've saved him a bit of time. Hopefully he's not, hopefully I haven't made things worse for him. So that's where we are with that for now. Alright, so here we are on the other corner of the house, internal corner, and we've got to replace these boards here. I've got these 2 out so far, and they're tucked in behind the scriber, so as you can see it's a little bit tricky. See how it goes. Right, so I've prepped this hole now. I spoke with the builder and he had a look at it, and he said that very fortunately it's not structurally an issue. I'm not going to go into the details because obviously your corner may or may not look anything like this at all. So in very short, basically we put in some extra support and braces in here just to make sure that the stud here that was a bit rotten, it actually is pretty good wood in behind there, so it's going to stay there, and we've got 2 pieces of wood either side which are all, nailed in to help support that stud. But mainly the main reason he said for this work is just that I've got something to attach the weatherboards to. He said it's not structural, and there's another stud just beside this anyway, so it's not too much of a problem there. And just for the sake of what we've done down here, we've removed all the rotten bits that we can reach, and put in a packer here onto the foundation. And this isn't actually a problem because it's supported in under here anyway, so not optimal, but it's an old house and sometimes there's only so much you can do. So as you remember, the building paper was absolutely shot, and so I have cut some of that off. Now the next part for me here is going to be to get some new building paper, and this needs to go, if you're going to do this, some people say, oh, you don't need to worry about the building paper, but I really do think it makes a difference. And had this had better building paper in here, we may not have had this rotting issue, at least with the structural parts of the house, or the the baseboard or whatever the hell it is down here. I'm not a builder, so yeah, so this, when we get the new building paper, it's going to have to go underneath the other building paper like that, so that any water that gets in here will drip onto the surface here and then onto the other one. If you do it the other way around, you put the building paper over the top, then the water running down will seep on the inside of that and into your house, so you definitely don't want that. So I'll run the building paper right down to the bottom, and I'll mark out where everything sort of roughly is, so I know where to nail in my my weatherboards. Now another thing the builder said to me, and he's like an old school builder, he's in his late 70s, he said, you see all these videos on YouTube with everyone taking their weatherboards back to the studs. And he said you can do that and there's nothing wrong with that, but he said a much easier way to do it is to actually take it back in between a stud. And I was like, what? But what I've done here isn't very optimal, because I haven't staggered these, but I just don't care. This garden area, it's hardly ever seen, and it doesn't have to look pretty. So I could have staggered these out to various studs and made it look beautiful, and perhaps on a newer house you might have done that. But just to help illustrate the point a little bit better, again down here, prior to his advice, I had already taken these weatherboards back to the stud. Now what he said that you can do, it might not work so well with the very base boards like this, but what he said is you can get a piece of wood, and behind, if this was your weatherboard here, you can put a piece of wood in behind and screw it with stainless steel screws through onto the back of that board, just a piece of 1x2 or something like that. Not even 1x2, probably less than that. Yeah, 1x2 or something. And then you can fit your other weatherboard onto that, and that just joins the back of the weatherboard. So if you get the concept there, that's what he said he does.
Okay, so to help illustrate what I'm talking about there, because I realize it wasn't very obvious, but basically this is the back of the wall, and this isn't to scale, but those 2 bits there are the studs, and you can see here what he's talking about. So you basically join the weatherboard with a block of wood in behind like this, and use stainless steel screws. You'll probably need to countersink those, and that's how that works between the studs, so that your join becomes a lot easier.
Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. The main one is, it's a real bastard to try and get these nails out of here and to actually get the weatherboard prized away enough at the wall here. And it always leaves a little bit of weatherboard up and behind, which just reminds me I need to get that piece out of there. Illustrated by this piece here, which I just took out, and it's pretty meshed up now, but you can see that this weatherboard here was up and behind. Oh god, you can't see much, sorry. I'll try to do one-hand camera work. Okay, I'll just pause for a second. Right, hopefully that's a bit better. So I've put this weatherboard back in just temporarily to show you how I kind of went in this corner. And the first thing was to get that multi-tool in under here, but of course you can't just pry this off easily because there's a nail under there, trying to get that nail out, especially when they're old nails, is really, really tricky. So the only way to do it is to use a multi-tool. But of course, on the stud, you can't pull the weatherboard away very easily. Whereas if you make your cut in the middle, the builder was explaining that you can join it later, like I said, with a piece of wood in behind. And he used stainless steel screws, and he reckons that you should definitely paint that weatherboard, or even better, just use some silicone sealant, which is faster, quicker, and you can just do that on the fly. Because if you use primer, you've got to wait for it to paint to dry, and you definitely don't just want to use primer by itself. You want to use primer and a top coat. So prying this away in between the studs would have been a lot easier had I made my cut here. And I still would have had to use the multi-tool. These blades go really dull really quick, so having done most of the job around the outside of the house, this is now completely shot. I don't know if you can see the teeth on that, but yeah, no, you probably can't, but they're knackered. So anyway, I had this cut. I made the cut here first with the multi-tool, sorry, up through here, straight in. I used a square to get it nice and perpendicular, 90 degrees, went straight through and did a plunge cut right the way through. And of course it's well and truly stuck in there still even after that. And you need to remember that the weatherboard goes up and under and along, and you can see a nail divot just in here where the nail's going through, and of course it tends to punt. What tends to happen is that they're not supposed to go through the weatherboard here. It's supposed to be just a little bit higher, so it would have missed the weatherboard, but they always seem to get it in the wrong place. And of course this weatherboard's now nailed into this one, so that means you've got several cuts to make. So the first one was to get up under here. I'll just try and get that in so you can see. So I went up through there and finally got through that nail underneath, and then of course I sort of went along here just a little bit just to make sure it was all loose. Got into the corner here and just made sure that was all nice and free and not stuck down, and then tried to chisel it out. And as you can see, it cracked. So I'll demonstrate what happened when I tried to do this. It didn't just fall out. That top piece got stuck in there. So this came out eventually as I got my chisel in there and banged down into the chisel and pulled it out. And I got this piece up here. And then I tried to get it out, but of course it was still stuck with this nail here. And it's not stuck where you think it is. It's the same nail, but of course it's underneath you need to get. So I had to now that the weatherboard's gone, now go in with the multi-tool again and get the back of that nail. So that's the tricky part. And once that came out and this was free, and there was no nail on the other end, fortunately this was all free, so then I was able to get my chisel and just pull that out. So I'm obviously simulating that makes it look very easy. It was a lot of mucking around, but that's how that kind of works with the weatherboards. So hopefully that demos it. One other thing I just remembered that the builder told me before I put this building paper in. You can see here the way they've done this corner is they went across with this wall first all the way to the edge, which is in behind here, and then these weatherboards went in. So when these get cut, if I'm doing this corner, I'm going to have to cut these at the right angle. But the builder said that just because they've gone across this way first doesn't mean that you have to follow suit. He said it's going to be very tricky to try and slide, if I get this wall done first like they did and then try and get these boards back in here, it's going to be very tricky. And I asked him, I said, can I change direction? He goes, yeah, absolutely, you can change direction. So probably obvious to builders, but in here you can see where this board goes across. He's told me to do these boards first and then to slot these ones in and taper them. Obviously they'll need to be tapered as well. He said that's about 11 to 12 degrees on average for weatherboards, but that's going to depend on the type of weatherboards that you've got. So you'll need to do that by trial and error, measure it. Once you've worked it out, you can just use your template and you can cut all the weatherboards at the right angle. It's not immediately obvious, but I'll try and show you here. You can see that angle going across, and they're all cut the same like that. But we're going to go straight across here first, and then we'll do that same angle beveled, just like here. You can see that that's angled. I'll exaggerate it. It's angled that way. So that bevel will need, well, that cut will need to be that way. Okay, it's a little bit haphazard, but the building paper's in. And as you can see, I have slid the paper up underneath that, so if any water gets in here, it's going to drip onto this and then out, rather than dripping on the inside of the paper, which is what you don't want. Okay, so in this corner I wanted to demonstrate one of the issues that I was encountering earlier. So if I tried to fit a weatherboard up under here, it's hitting on something, and this is the common problem. The board is actually, this splits off. I've tried to cut it through here with a multi-saw, it didn't go in deep enough, and there may be even this nail here could be holding it. So you can see this chunk of wood, maybe you can see that under there. So that has to come out before I can get the board in. And I'm going to try and do that using the multi-tool, getting up under here and see if I can actually might just plunge cut straight up this way. It doesn't matter if you actually damage the other board a little bit. You can see how there's a cut there, so you get your multi-tool up in there and it's a nice narrow one. It doesn't matter because you can fill that later with builder's bog or any kind of bog basically, and then paint over it. Okay, so the builder that I spoke with said that if you're going to prime the ends of your boards before you put them in, which you can do, you really need to put a top coat on as well. And as you can imagine, that's a little time consuming because you've got to wait for things to dry. He said that what he does, he uses silicone. So I'm using this particular product, the Seal Flex MS, and the reason I'm using this is it's paintable. And it will basically seal up the end of the board in one hit without me having to wait about hours for it to dry and what have you. So I've pasted a layer on that end, and just for good luck and good measure I've put a layer on the other side where it's going to be up against on the corner here where it's been getting wet in there, just to help reduce the chance of the end getting rotten. So I've also placed some silicone on the other side here, and then a bit of a bead. You don't actually need to join it because we're going to use a joiner, a special type of thing called a soaker that's going to go across the front of that, and I'll talk about those later on. Got the first couple of bits in. This is obviously set now with a nail here and here. You really want to make sure that you're not nailing down here on the bottom part of the board, because it's not that part there that actually sits against the stud, it's actually this angle here. So you need to be above this line here on the back. Alright, so that when it's upright, imagine that this back, this is our bit where we're nailing it. It has to be there, not there. So that's how that gets done. And the other thing is, with these boards, if you're sliding into a tight corner, if there's a part of a board that's actually going to be hidden, you might want to actually just nip the corner off the board here, or here. I'll demonstrate what's happening here. So this is obviously going to go in behind here, and if I slide it up, it's quite hard to get in there, but if I slide it in, sometimes you'll find that that corner there is going to be impossible to get through unless you shorten the board. So I did shorten the board a little bit because they don't need to be all the way back against that back edge there, all the way in there. They only need to be just enough so that this can be sealed up. And cutting that corner there made it just a bit easier. Now I might also need to cut another corner in here, but we'll see how we go. The other thing is it helps to have a pry bar just to pull this board forward, because you can see there's a bit of movement in that, which is good, but it does make it hard to get the next board in. So a pry bar can come in super handy, like this kind of thing here, simple jobby. Now this second board down is not installed yet, and at a glance it looks fine, right? Especially if you're down in there close in your corner. But what you really want to do is you want to actually measure it, because if we look at it, you can see that it's there's a wider, it's actually on an angle. So this part here is, it's coming downwards. So I'm basically measuring as I go, and it helps to have, if you haven't got a second pair of hands, it helps to have a wedge, an extra spare bit of weatherboard or something, something in there, just to pry between the ground and the weatherboard, just to hold it at the right level. So either use a spirit level or measure off the previous board, but it would be better, rather than measuring off the previous board each time, to measure off a set location, like this board here. So we know the first one was for these particular weatherboards, it's 120, so I measured down 120 and got the first one in level. But you know, that's going to get slightly off and off and off each time. So to be accurate, I really want to measure from here and make it 240, or basically whatever the distance is from here to here, and then here to here. And then when I do the next board, it'll be again here to here. So I'm keeping the measurement accurate as I go. Hope that makes sense. Another thing that I just thought I'd mention is that normally when you do your weatherboards, my understanding is that you would do them from the bottom upwards. But in this case, I kind of have to do them the other way, because I'm forced to use the same scribe angle that I've got here with this cutout piece, and I want to make sure that they fit correctly. So I'm actually doing it a bit backwards just for this piece as I come down here, coming into this corner down here. So I'm going top to bottom. Now the other thing that occurred to me is, instead of nailing fully in like this, you might just want to consider just tacking your nails in. I am drilling here, it's pine, it probably won't split, but especially if you're using recycled weatherboards or a hardwood or something like that, with older drier woods, they will split. So I recommend just drilling a hole. You only need to drill the hole as far as the thickness of the weatherboard. Don't drill it all the way through, otherwise your nail will be loose, because it's really where it's going to bind is into the stud itself at the back. Yeah, so we just tack them like this, and then you can do it. You know, if you make a big mistake, you don't have to rip it all out. You can just pull the nails out and sort of start again. Okay, we've got the boards just tacked in at the moment. I did put the first one in, and then realized afterwards that it would be better just to tack them just a little bit so I can adjust them if needed. Haven't needed to adjust them, but and everything went in fine. So silicone the edges of the old board and the new boards on any sides that have been cut, and obviously this side as well that's been cut, and then just tack them in. And obviously you'll need to know the position of where your stud is. In this case, as you remember, I've had to make a repair, so the stud's in a different place. The rotten stud was behind here. Now normally, just to remember, you would not put your weatherboards in top to bottom. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to continue the profile here, as I mentioned earlier, and it's important in this case that I do them top to bottom. So normally you would not put nails, you know, in this position high up in the board here. You would do bottom to top, and as you're going in, you'd put your nail in here just above where the board behind would be. So you want to just miss that board. So we will do that, but we want these nails to go in first. The other thing I just want to point out is that at the moment this whole section here, I don't know if you can see this easily, but it's actually able to float. It's coming in and out a little bit. So as we tack this in, as we basically push these nails in further, it's going to tighten it all up. So I'll do that now, and then we'll start working on the next side here. Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, sorry, before you go tapping the nails in, probably seems obvious, but you know, you really want to make sure that you've got a hole punch, and just hold that in close with your finger in behind the hole punch like that. If you try and do it like this, it'll slide all over the place, right? Get in close with a hammer, get it a bit further in than that, and then, you know, line up your hole punch. Otherwise you can end up with indentations in the wood, and you'll have to fill those as well. Right, I've got that nailed in, those nailed in, and the next part here, because remember I've changed direction, so the old weatherboards were that they went in this direction all the way back to the stud, and then they did all of this wall, whereas now we've changed direction, which is what the builder said was fine to do. And indeed that has definitely made things a lot easier. So you just need to think about your particular issue, your particular corner, and what's going to make sense in terms of getting your boards back in. I mean, you may not have a window beside you know, so it may not be an issue. But for this particular case, trying to slide them back in behind these this fitting here was going to be a mission if we'd already had the boards going in here, whereas now it's changed direction. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to get the left hand boards in place, and obviously we talked earlier about an angle that's going to be involved here. So rather than trying to, you know, I mean there's tools you can use to do it, and I've got one down in the garage which will get me that angle, but I'm going to go for what the builder said, which is 11 degrees. It doesn't need to be perfect because all of these joints that go up here need to be scraped out and siliconed with proper paintable silicone, like the stuff here that I showed you earlier. So this is the Sealer Flex. There's one particular brand that the builder recommended. I've used it multiple times before. It's got a good longevity. If you haven't got that where you are located, find a similar sealant, but just check the packaging. It must say paintable. If it's not paintable, don't bother getting it because it won't be what you're after. So to get that angle, we are going to basically sacrifice a small piece of board, and we're going to go for 11 or 12 degrees on the miter saw, just to give us a guide to see if we're on the right track. So down here, adjust that to 11 degrees, and we'll give it a cut and see how it goes. Okay, I've got that at 11 degrees, and I just dry fitted it, and it works just fine. I slid it up perpendicular with the other board there, and it looks like it'll fit nice and snug. And of course silicone's going to go in there, so it doesn't have to be perfect. In this case it's actually going to go under here, and that fits just how we want it. I want to show you why we typically don't install weatherboards from the top down. So I had a crack at doing the top one and see if I could follow suit and go downwards, but the problem is that you see this gap here, that's not because I cut the board wrong. I measured the board very carefully, and I knew that it would slide up, and as it went up it would move across because of the angle here. So I actually gave myself a few extra millimeters, but I just could not get it to fit in, and so had to cut a little bit off, and now you get a bit of a gap. Now it's okay if I had to, because we're going to put soaker on here anyway, so a bit of soaker goes up underneath here and it's going to be covered. So visually it's not a problem, and as long as we seal it all off, it's technically not an issue. And we are on the stud here, but it would be better, obviously, I think, to install from the bottom up. The only thing that makes me a little bit nervous is just getting this last weatherboard in. So if we go from the bottom and then we get this last one, it's going to be a bit of a mission to get it in there. Okay, so first, with this first weatherboard down the bottom here, you can see that I haven't really cut it particularly well. There's quite a gap. I'm not too worried about it, but it did occur to me it might be easier, rather than trying to wing it, to actually scribe something out. So because each weatherboard that's going to go in here is going to have the same kind of problem, and it's you want it to fit properly like this. So in order to do that, I just made a simple little jig like this. So that's a useful tip, either that or on a piece of cardboard. So basically I just scribed out on a piece of cardboard in behind here, and then just cut it out to the right shape. Use a piece of wood, and then when I go to mark my board, first cut the 11 degrees for the end. So that's done, and then the next thing, so once that's chopped at the end there, just take your scribe and just lay it over, just mark it out with a pen, and then I used a jigsaw to cut that out. It's quite fiddly to get it really tight, but yeah, you can always just screw it up and just chop that bit off again and just try again. So don't measure your board first. This is nice and long, it's got plenty of extra length, so if it doesn't fit in here, you know, it's way longer, so I'll just be able to, once I've got it right on the right hand side, I'll just cut it down here to just, so yeah, don't cut your boards to length first. Okay, we've got our second to last board going in place now, and remember we're going upwards for this lot here. So again, just a reminder, we've got silicone on here, so that it will seal off and don't have to worry about painting it and waiting for that top coat to dry. I think I should mention also that if you use a primer and you just use a primer, that is better than nothing, but apparently that will soak in water, so it's better to use a top coat as well. In this case, not doing either of that, just using the silicone. Okay, so sometimes you find that the weatherboards, they're newer weatherboards, they might not match exactly with the profile of the other weatherboard. In other words, they might be slightly thinner, and in this case here, to help the weatherboard be flush at this side here, I just had to use a little bit of extra building paper because the old building paper was removed and that's taken away some of the thickness. So just slip that in there if you're really fussy about your boards being lined up. Right, and then we're nailing in, we're nailing from the bottom now. You'll remember that on the other board, the other wall, because we were going top to bottom, we kind of had to nail in up here at the top part of the board. Whereas typically with weatherboards, my understanding is that you nail in here and just miss the board underneath. So this nail here should be roughly just above the board here, so that nail doesn't go through. I mean, it doesn't matter, but you could split the board if you do that, and it certainly will make it a pain for anyone else to try and get the board off if you've got the nail going through both boards, because I'll have to cut that nail to get that board out if it has to come out again. And again, I'm just tacking in, so we're going in through the stud. Just a light tack for now in case I need to move anything. We know that roughly our position is going to be here, studs here, so we just go straight in. Make sure the weatherboard is pushed flat at the top, because it's the back of the top of the weatherboard that's going to be sitting flush against the stud. Just check the alignment at the bottom, make sure it's where you want it, and then just a couple taps to get that tapped in, and then we'll go for the final weatherboard. The last thing that we'll be doing at some point we'll be getting some metal soakers. I don't have them with me, so I'll do a separate clip for that. Okay, so with this last board, it's being a bit tricky. What I've done is I've actually taken the corner off, and also the other corner down here, just to make it a bit easier to get in. And it's also because it wants to, when it's going to be installed, it's going to slide up, and as it slides up, it's going to slide in that direction as it goes up, which means you have to be careful with how long your board is. To help get it in, I've also beveled the edge here just a little bit. I'll see if that helps, but yeah, that should hopefully be able to be installed now. With this top board, I'm finding that this board here is wanting to push down. It was quite hard to get in under here, so I'm just using a pry bar to help to pull this other board out away from the wall as I tap it in, and just really gently tapping it here with the hammer. I only have I could just use a block of wood or something, so but this corner here you can see is almost just sliding in here, so we'll tap that back and up and we'll see how we go. Sorry I can't show you the exact process, I've only got one hand to hold the camera, so I just managed to get that board in. Literally all I did is just gave this a few taps with the hammer, and that little corner there just slid past the edge of the other board, so it looks like that should install now, and I'll pull the pry bar out once I've got this, once I've got that a little bit further up. Okay, the last little bit of the job to finish off here, aside from painting, is to get the soakers in. So the soakers that I was talking about are these stainless steel things here. There's different kinds. There's ones that go on the corners, like over here, and there's these flat ones here which go across boards. So basically they come as a galvanized unit like this, about $1 each or more depending on the size of your weatherboard. They don't need to fit your weatherboard perfectly because they're actually going to slide up underneath the weatherboard like that, just a fraction. The most important thing about these, the builder told me, is to make sure that you prime them with etching primer. I would recommend something like this, but probably a spray if you can get it. And this is Rust Guard, and you can see it says ELS etch primer, so you definitely want something that's going to etch the paint, otherwise what will happen is they'll rust really quickly. So for these, basically you can just use a chisel to scrape away any excess paint,
or a scraper with a tungsten blade.
and then you can use a chisel to get up under here to push the board away slightly, and then they should just slide straight in. It's a bit fiddly, but I've already done one up here, and we'll put some nails in shortly. So this one's not going to quite go in, so we use a chisel just beside here just to push that board away. Found the chisel there. So what we do here is we basically just get our chisel with the beveled edge facing towards you, and we want to go into here, so we're just going to literally just a couple little taps just to bend the board out, and in theory that should just slide straight in. If it doesn't, you can try tapping it with a hammer. If that still doesn't work, you might need a pry bar or something on the other side just to get in there. You get the idea. This one will go in later. Also, I've put a little bit extra silicone into these joints here, and put in some extra nails here on the bottom part of the board that were not there before, and I've siliconed up fairly heavily in here just to make sure that seal is nice and thick and it's going to last for a while. It'll all be painted. I actually lifted these back up again and primed the nail heads for the weatherboards, because I had hit those with the hole punch, and of course the steel was exposed. They're galvanized nails, and if you don't prime them with something, so I just used they'll rust. So I used the same etching primer just to dab a bit on those nail heads. Yeah, and then the last thing, just to get these in, they're just little tiny nails, yay big. These are actually subfloor nails, but yeah, they're just little tiny nails, and you don't really need to go in far. They're only, the size of your finger. Okay, so this is the other hole that I patched. You can see just around about head height, a few boards had to be removed as well, and basically I didn't show all the steps for this job, but it was just the inverse of the other job. So I did exactly the same kind of thing. I changed the direction of the boards so that I could easily get these ones in first, and get them up against the stud, and then slid these in very similar, making small cuts on the back of the corners behind here so that this last board could get in. So the way that I did this one was started with this bottom one here, then this one, as you can see here, bit of a problem. I just absolutely could not get this in without removing this huge big long piece of scribe on the window. I could have done that and it would have made it probably able to get in, but I decided to opt for a cut in the middle, and I'll just put a soaker across there. I don't think you'll notice it, but you had to cut the board, then get this side in, and then this side here. So a little bit tricky, but it's just the same kinds of problem solving that you'll face with what I faced with the other side as well. Just sort of just a bit of an opposite, really. Cool.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully that showed you a bit of the process involved with the corner weatherboard replacement. Maybe it helps you to decide whether it's a job you actually want to tackle yourself, or maybe it is something you want to get a builder in for. But hopefully it also shows that, if you're relatively handy, you can do it yourself. And please leave a comment if you have something that you want to share in terms of tips or whatever for someone else who's reading. I'm not really a big comment reader, so don't be offended if I don't reply. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks everyone.